One of the biggest lessons that I wish I had learned earlier in my CRO career is understanding that most e-commerce stores are not able to really do A/B testing. So when I talk about A/B testing in this kind of context, I'm talking about proper statistically significant A/B testing for business results. And this thing, like once I started to realize it and figure it out, it started to feel very limiting. I went into something where I thought I had the full tool belt, but then very quickly I learned that like there's all these limitations to it. And my background is on this religious data-driven CRO community where everything's run to the perfection on an enterprise level. And there, I think oftentimes the perfect became the enemy of the good. So we went from being complete amateurs to not knowing anything that we were doing and simply like being a bit lost and hopeless, often thinking that we were doing some good without really doing it, to a complete other extreme where it needed to be like Amazon or Google level with our testing, and if we couldn't get the perfect sample size, we wouldn't run it. Now here, I think I've also, and like our company has evolved to understanding that there is a middle way, and we've developed a methodology where we can run dozens of tests each month, like on fairly non-major stores. So here, this is based on micrometrics, and this will also enable you to test very quickly for results without having a ton of traffic or transactions on your store. So generally there's two kinds of micro conversions. So you have the ones that primarily move you further down the funnel. So for example, this could be clicking to a collection page, or it could be an add to cart on a product page. And then you have the ones that directly move you toward the alternative conversion path. So this could be, for example, email subscription or Facebook notification, that kind of thing. Now here, this kind of thing is like only possible when you understand that people are actually climbing the funnel. So if you think of the traditional marketing funnel, you have to flip that around, and then you imagine these people like almost with a rope going up and climbing your funnel. So they are encouraging or encountering all this friction along the way, and then it is your job as the marketer to help them overcome that friction. Now, we want to think of this in steps. So if we get a person from, say, the product page to the next step, that is generally a win for us. Now, this can also be a little bit of a phantom win if you just postpone the abandonment. So for example, like you might have a product page that has a lot of people adding to cart, but they all leave on the next step on the cart. That's not ideal either. So we need to be able to understand how that behavior is likely to be and then adjust to that. But with this understanding, we can test a lot more, because generally if you have, say, a 2% conversion rate on an e-commerce store, you have 3 to 5 times more add to carts than that. So generally then you have 3 to 5 times more conversions to test with than you would otherwise have. And this means that your testing program can either be 3 to 5 times faster, or you will need a lot less of lifts in order to see it statistically significantly. So testing with micrometrics is generally a quicker way of testing, and most stores aren't running quite enough transactions to test otherwise anyway. So the site's transactions become the bottleneck, whereas with micro conversions, we can accept this imperfection and move beyond these limitations. So quickly, like what are some of the things that you should be aware of when you are testing for micro conversions? Well, the most important thing is that essentially you need to give your variant a fair chance to get to the next step. So you, for example, you don't test a huge add to cart button versus a tiny one, because that means like, okay, people are more likely to click huge things, but that just means that like most likely like the abandonment on the next step will be higher. So the layout of the page will need to be relatively similar. So for example, you can test copy pretty well with this, but then don't test this like huge add to cart button. Then ideally the transaction is also a little bit further away. So for example, if you have a longer funnel, you can test click-through rates, because these click-through rate will have a less of an impact on the transaction than it would otherwise be. So testing a click-through rate on the cart is sketchier than testing add to cart on the product page, which is sketchier than testing home page to collection page, for example. And a lot of the email marketers actually say that their job is just to sell the click on the email. And there is some truth to this because it tends to be a little bit further away from the funnel itself. Then third step is simply like when it doesn't make sense to optimize for macro. So that's the third checklist item. Sometimes it actually makes sense to optimize for macro and like to test for macro actually. You're still optimizing for macro all the time. You're optimizing for revenue and transactions, which is the macro here, not just the add to cart step, but you are testing for the add to cart step to get a lot more data. And then you need to also pick micro conversions that make sense. That's the fourth item. So bounce rate, for example, oftentimes doesn't make sense, even though that is kind of like a micro metric as well. Then lastly, you do have to have enough micro conversions. So that's like last item on the checklist. So have enough micro conversions if you want to test for micro conversions. Still important to leave that in there. So to recap on this checklist, layout of the page is relatively similar. Transaction is ideally a little bit further away. Then it doesn't make sense to test for revenue or transactions. It does make sense to test for this particular micro metric. So not, for example, like something that like wouldn't have an impact or likely correlation with the revenue and transactions. And lastly, you do have enough micro conversions at least to test. So that's the checklist. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you got a lot out of it. Now, if you are having a store that is say on the 7-figure range, you most likely still can't test very well with A/B testing. So this is where you get to play around with A/B testing. If you are interested in having me and my team help you with this, go to growgurus.com to learn more. We have our application page there as well, that you can find out if it seems like it could be a good mutual fit. If you haven't already liked the video, please do so. Subscribe to the channel for more great e-commerce CRO videos. And here, the perfect video for you to watch next is the 6 essential steps to a perfect A/B testing program. If you combine that with this one, you're already way ahead of the game. So make sure to watch that now, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.